Hey guys, it's Paul, combat veteran, MMA fighter, YouTuber, and we are back checking out the next installment of Bricky's Every Faction in 40k Explained. This is my fourth installment of this marathon video, right? And we are walking through every single faction in the Imperium. So it's a doozy, but we've been having fun, and we're going to get right back into it. But first, if you too wonder what it would feel like to get stuck inside a big dreadnought for the rest of eternity, hit that subscribe button. And be sure to hit like on the video, tell the YouTube algorithm that I am making quality content. And check out my Instagram, my second channel, and of course my merch store, right? We are getting more merch in all the time, right? The artists are back with their design, and it's worth checking out. Once we've done that, let's get into it.
Nice.
Oh Lord, he coming!
Do you like gigantic walkers the size of homes or medium-sized buildings? Do you want to kill heretics, but you want to kill like 40 of them per turn? Do you want a gigantic old-school knight noble house style of walkers with giant chainsaw arms? Then you got Imperial Knights. Imperial Knights, it's not a whole lot to talk about them because they're just gigantic walkers, but they have this old-school like house feel to them, like literally like they're houses. Each Imperial Knight comes from a house, and each of them act in their own special way. These
Okay, so let's talk about what he means by houses. Okay, so in the early Middle Ages, the really Western Europe, right, which had this incredible power gap after the fall of the Western Roman Empire. Bear in mind, the Eastern Roman Empire continued on under Justinian into what's now called the Byzantine Empire. There was a huge gap in power and in stability. And for a large portion of the Middle Ages, for several reasons, but one of the biggest being coastal raids by Viking forces, Western Europe needed to figure out a way to sort of modularly respond to these incursions. The result, of course, was the system of feudalism. Feudalism is one in which a landed gentry, a landed upper class, basically exchanges loyalty to a higher lord in exchange for a level of protection and exchange for resources. Right, so you would have this hierarchy where a king sat on top who had the loyalty of, I'm going to say like their dukes, who would have their own land holdings, but loyal to the dukes were smaller nobility who would in turn control, still smaller nobility. Finally, you would have these land holding families that had a number of indentured serfs working the land, and those individual families would provide knights, armed forces, to their higher vassals. And, of course, this system allowed for a sort of modular and escalating response to these Viking incursions, where a small incursion could be met with the armed forces of a smaller noble house, and larger incursions could summon the aid of higher and higher echelons of houses. Of course, this system was not without considerable drawbacks, one of the chief being that you would have conflicts among vassals ostensibly loyal to the same higher regent, king or duke or whatever. So you would have these conflicts between the two, even though they were still ostensibly allied. You also had problems with succession, right? Because you would never want to divide your land holdings among, say, two sons. You would need to keep them intact, and of course, you can only then pass them down to one son. Of course, this creates like another class of sort of unlanded noble. Right, it's not a super. It's a system that's sort of stable, but not terribly so. right? And when we think of knights, of course, as the Middle Ages grew later and later, the tactics of the time depended heavily on heavy cavalry. These were mounted, armored knights. Again, think about meeting an incursion. You had to be able to rapidly get to the battlefield. And, of course, heavy knights were seen as the most effective battlefield tool, right? They were able to conduct these powerful cavalry charges, break up formations of light infantry. They were able to afford metal armor, mail armor, and they were just exponentially more powerful than the light foot soldier of the early and mid-Middle Ages. Of course, this developed exactly in this, almost the exact same system evolved in Japan at around the same time, and in both cases, because knighthood or serving as a heavy trooper, a heavy soldier in the armed forces, or again, we're in an army, right? Your own army or the army of your noble above you, was seen as being a sign of nobility itself. It encompassed a huge code in Japan. It was Bushido, right? In, of course, Western Europe, it was knightly behavior, and these sort of chivalry. There we go. Chivalry was the term of the knightly code in Western Europe, right? So all that to say, when we talk about houses of knights, right, that's sort of what this reflects, and the houses reflect sort of the lineage of, sometimes dating back quite a long time, of hereditary titles and service in the name, again, of your noble house. And in this case, it probably refers to the fact that ultimately these knights answer to the emperor, but I'm curious to know, and maybe Bricky will get into this. If he doesn't, let me know in the comments. He glosses over a lot. If, like feudal knights, these knights also get into conflict with each other's planets and holdings and houses, if that's how this works, or if it literally is just hereditary lines of people that get that inherit, knight armor effectively. Okay, having established what he means by houses and knights, let's get back into it.
Behemoth of walkers also destroy almost everything in their path, killing full swaths of...
I love how he says it destroys everything in their path and plays video of a knight being chopped into.
Squads in a couple shots, stepping on legions of troops. Like, these things do not mess around. And they look so cool. Imperial Knights and Chaos Knights, actually, for that matter, don't have a whole lot to discuss. They're just super big, heavy walkers, and they look different depending on your house or chaos god you currently believe in. And overall, these things are just really cool if you want to murder everything in your path. They're the big, scary, big unit of Warhammer, and if you want to collect them, go to town. They make for a great painting project, too. Getting more back down to earth, let's talk something about a little bit different, a little more gold.
Okay, one other comment about walkers, right? Why are things bipedal, right? And why am I always so perplexed about bipedal walkers? To be clear, as a guy who grew up playing MechWarrior, and still plays, frankly, the game is still excellent, I love giant bipedal walkers. But there's sort of an issue, right? Human beings, most mammals, right? The vast majority of mammals don't operate on two legs. There's tiny exceptions, and those are things that some move like a kangaroo, right? They hop along. Some things are like a bird, right? Where they don't operate normally on the terrestrial ground, right? And they just sort of use their two-legged motion as like a secondary means of conveyance. And then you have, of course, hominids, right? You have things like bonobos and great apes that are bipedal, but again, like birds, they operate in this third dimension, right? They operate often in jungles with trees. They are in the trees frequently. So again, for them, being bipedal is like a secondary means of conveyance. But human beings are weird. We have these two hands, right? But we don't really have the strength to power ratio of like a bonobo, right? So we don't swing through trees. Instead, our legs are tall and skinny and scrawny, and they're actually pretty sensitive, right? A small injury to your leg will put you on crutches for months and months and months, right? But what these skinny legs can do is they enable us to run and move really efficiently over long distances. Like, that is almost certainly evolutionarily what our tall, skinny legs grant us, right? To give you a little bit of a scale, if you're a horse, or if you have a horse and you want to have that horse just do one day of the most amount of travel they can do, you can squeeze probably sustainably like 20 miles out of a horse, right? You can push it one day really hard and get further, as you can with a human. But we're going to say about 20-ish, 25 miles. To get that 25 miles, you should expect your horse to drink around 15 gallons of water. To get a human being to travel those same 25 miles, you could do it in about 1.5 gallons, maybe even less, right? So just the efficiency of the movement is pretty unbelievable when you have these two legs. But it comes at a lot of compromise, right? We have to use our arms to maintain our balance as we move, right? We have these inner ear mechanisms that help us stay stable as terrain changes as we run or walk. It's a really complex way of moving. And for most animals in the animal kingdom, it's not efficient. 4 legs are way more effective. You think again, the fastest land animal, the cheetah, 4 legs, right? Even pack animals like goats, llamas, or horses, 4 legs. So the idea that human beings will choose to build these walkers, it makes sense, right? In a future with tons of technology, you could build a 2-legged walker, but if you're not using them for high efficient travel over incredible distances, right? Which frankly the wheel kind of gives you, right? The wheel is a even better mechanical advantage. You just can't biologically have a wheel because of attrition, right? There's too much grinding and friction that has to happen. A biological wheel probably wouldn't make a ton of sense. But if you were to build something like that, you would want it to cover tons and tons of distances really quickly, right? Other than that, mechanically, for purposes of stability, 4 legs makes more sense, especially if you were building a war machine where not only, again, do you expect it like this to have to fight, right? Because here's the other thing. Look, when nature has animals that engage in person-to-person combat, striking, colliding combat, like, again, you see in these knights with their big chain swords, nature gives them 4 legs. Think about a ram, right, which has 2 gigantic weapons on its forehead. These are ramming, slicing, stabbing weapons. It gives them 4 legs to generate power and stability. So, again, the design of knights, I love walkers, but I still think that from an engineering and a tactical perspective, it doesn't make a ton of sense for what they're used for. Anyway, that's just sort of my thoughts on knights. Let's move on to the Adeptus Custodes.
If guardsmen are regular soldiers, space marines are super soldiers, Grey Knights are super soldiers, the Adeptus Custodes are super soldiers cubed. The Adeptus Custodes are the 3rd major army I own. I know, 3 armies. I know, I got carried away, okay? But that's all. I only have 3, okay? They are our final brand of Space Marines, but these ones are super special, okay? If a guardsman is 6 foot, a Space Marine is 7 feet, a custodian is 8 feet. These are the giant defenders of Holy Terra, which is also Earth. Earth is Terra, Terra, themselves. These are the people that literally guard the Emperor's throne room, hence custodes. These boys protect the Emperor's throne room at all times and are literally like handcrafted people. They're not humans brought up by a gene seer or something. These are all handcrafted super soldiers. I think from a tube. These behemoth of men are like 8 feet, 8.5 feet tall, and functionally immortal. They stand still, spear in hand, for hundreds of years without the need to sleep and barely even the need to eat, watching over the throne room and every other area of Holy Terra for their entire purpose in life. And oh my lord, are they terrifying. These custodians put...
Okay, yeah. I mean, I love the look of gold. So it sounds like what this is inspired by is the Praetorian Guard in Rome. This was the guard who famously would safeguard the well-being of Caesar, the Caesar. And, you know, so what's interesting about the Praetorian Guard is that early on they were the elite of Rome's legions. And they functioned a lot like, it sounds like, the Emperor's Custodes, right? Highly trained, very experienced, taller than average legionnaires. But as time went on, the Praetorian Guard became sort of, I'm not going to use the word corrupted, but they became a political actor in a way that it sounds like the Custodes just aren't. And by that I mean the Praetorian Guard would, kill the old emperor if they deemed him underperforming or non-performing. They would often install one of their own as emperor. They would, of course, operate behind the scenes using the threat of usurping to coerce or cajole the emperor to take certain actions, or I'm sorry, the Caesar to take certain actions. The Praetorian Guard became literally a kingmaker in late Roman imperial politics. So, and this is sort of the liability of any elite guard, right? And the other example that comes to mind is the Republican Guard in Saddam's Iraq. You had the Republican Guard, and then you had like an elite unit within the Republican Guard. They might have been called the elite Republican Guard, but ultimately they too were not staffed with elite soldiers. They were staffed with the soldiers most loyal to Saddam, which of course is not a recipe for, again, an elite Praetorian Guard. It's just a recipe for mediocre, entitled, kind of the man baby of soldiers. Again, the emperor seems to have attempted to solve this problem by creating a genetically perfect soldier who is both perfectly loyal and perfectly, incorruptible and perfectly true to the cause. But you can't engineer that sort of thing, right? If there's one thing we know, it's that across the world, across the thousands of empires that have existed in human history, elite military forces that guard the seats of power almost always are unable over time to resist the temptation of influencing those seats of power. And maybe the Custodes do too. Again, let me know. Does the lore have the Custodes doing this sort of thing? Going against the High Lords, installing High Lords that are favorable, influencing Imperium-wide decisions in ways that they deem appropriate? Let me know.
Put Space Marines to shame. If you liked your super soldiers, these are your super mega soldiers. One of these men can take on probably 3 Space Marines and most likely win. There are many different groups of custodians as well, like the Solar Watch, or there's also one of my personal favorite, the Aquilan Shield. The Aquilan Shield go out to seemingly unimportant individuals and protect them because they believe that they are going to be doing something very important in their lives. For instance, let's say a regular guardsman gets the protection of this giant 8.5-foot tall golden god because that guardsman will end up becoming a general one day or something of that nature. The custodians work in mysterious ways and are almost always...
Wait, another important question. So they're psychic? Because why else would they randomly identify a rando stranger to protect if they aren't able to see the future? Or is it like, are they like the Grey Knights where they're all psychers and they can like smell out other psychers and they want to like protect other powerful psychers? Again, lore experts in the comments, help me lore experts.
Outnumbered, but never outmatched. These people are pretty horrifying, both on the tabletop as well as in the lore. There are very few of them, however, and there's actually an extremely small amount of them. But that's kind of the point. There's only so many of these people that can have war gear this strong, weapons this powerful, and training this good. And the custodians have all three of it. For 100 years, I stood my watch amidst the somber shadows of the Sanctum Imperialis. I was still as a statue, but always ready, always attuned to dangers unseen. Days, months, years passed by in a frenzied blur beyond those walls, yet within little moved and nothing changed. For 100 years I did not but wait, yet had any threat appeared, I would have struck it down in a heartbeat. For 100 years I stood my watch, and as it ends I can tell you this: patience is a weapon. The custodians are the top dogs of...
Okay, so that's interesting. So that sounds a little bit like it's inspired by, again, a much, I'm going to say, a Warhammer 40k-ified version of the U.S. Army's Honor Guard. So in Washington, D.C., in Arlington Cemetery, and in other critical sites in D.C., but really the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier is the classic example. The U.S. Army staffs guards the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, and this is a 24/7 unceasing ceremonial patrol in which a soldier walks up and down a set path in front of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, who is a symbol of, so the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier is the remains of, I want to say, a soldier from the First World War whose remains were never identified, but they were confirmed to be a U.S. soldier. Those remains were brought back to the United States and interred in this Tomb of the Unknown Soldier as a resting place, symbolically, for all soldiers who died unknown, unidentified in the service of their country. And it's a larger symbol as a sort of like, it's like a collective grave, right, for all the soldiers who have died in their country's service. And, in addition to the soldiers' individual graves. And so they have an honor guard that operates 24/7 with beautifully polished, perfect uniforms. Everything they do is a ceremony, from the changing of the guard to the laying of ceremonial wreaths, to the patrolling, to inspecting the individual soldiers before they go on patrol or before they begin their patrol. Right, they are ceremonially inspected by their their non-commissioned officer in charge. And it's fascinating. If you've never seen it, it's worth watching the videos. It's worth visiting if you can. But what's also interesting is, like the Adeptus custodes, these soldiers are picked. They actually apply to become a member of, first, the Honor Guard generally, right, who does all ceremonies within the DC area. And they apply from the regular army. They have to be endorsed by their commander. And in almost every case, nowadays, there was a time when almost every single one was a combat veteran. Every single one, it comes from a excellent unit, right? And again, these guys are selected. They apply for and are then selected to become, honor guard members. Then they are trained in all the official ceremonial drill and ceremony, right? So extra ceremonial training. Of course, this is after their standard combat training. For, again, many, it's after a combat deployment. I had, I'm going to say 3 maybe of my soldiers apply for service in the Honor Guard after our deployment. I think I had 1 selected, but a huge honor, especially, but again, I think the fact that they had done this 12-month tour in Afghanistan, had seen combat, right, to come back, and then they said, hey, and had obviously stellar performances, that's why the Honor Guard selected them. But even if it had selected them, they still had to complete the extremely rigorous training in ceremonial, all the ceremonies, right? Because they also do funerals in DC, they do presidential escorts, they do everything. So Again, a fascinating real-world parallel. And if you see these soldiers, again, you can see in their uniforms, you can see in their dress that this is not their first rodeo. They are not exclusively drill and ceremony soldiers. They are often combat veterans, often with stellar service records. If you look it up, you can see a number with Purple Hearts, a number with Bronze Stars, and other Valor devices. They really are the cream of the crop
of the Imperium, and they hurt just that same way. Though I do want to discuss a little bit about the Sisters of Silence before we get out of here, because the Sisters of Silence I also have a few of, and they're really fun, but they don't get enough attention. These kind of bald plume ladies are a whole group of pariahs, or also known as blanks. We'll be referring to them as blanks from now on. So as every mind is somewhat connected to the warp, these blanks are a genetic mutation that has it suppressed heavily. Because of that mind suppression, normal people feel this weird, like, uncomfortable nature when around them. When a Sister of Silence walks past them, you feel ill. You feel just uncomfortable and strange. So most of them don't actually live past childhood, because once they are birthed, they're, well, you know, killed or something at a very young age, because they just emit a horrifying aura. These ladies, however, are guardians of the throne as well for more psychic threats. See, none of the custodians are psychers, so they have a difficult time dealing with major demons and other kinds of psychic phenomena. These sisters are extremely specialized in it, all of them taking a vow of silence as they don't speak, hence the term Sisters of Silence, but they communicate through hand gestures and things of that nature. But if there's a demon issue, if there's any kind of warp-based problem, the sisters are extremely adept at dealing with them, thanks to their blank gene. They normally work a lot of time with the custodians because they have to deal with both kinds of threats, but they're not represented that way on the tabletop. In fact, they only have like one real model for them, which is very unfortunate. I hope they'll get something new soon, because I think they should really be working together as it is that way in the lore, but hopefully we'll get there soon. But if we're talking about blanks, let's talk assassins.
My precious power ring, gone forever.
It's been a long video. We're about to round it out. We got this and one more human thing, and then we're done. The assassins, though,
Okay, yeah, again, I am sort of fascinated, like, in lore, is the psychic blank gene just, like, recessive and requires 2X chromosomes to activate? That's why it's just women? Is it just only women with this trait are selected for the Sisters of Silence for some other reason? I'm just sort of curious in lore why there is this strong sex divide in things like the Custodes and the Sisters of Silence and the Adeptus Sororitas. You know, is there supposedly like a difference in the way the psychic powers and connection to the warp and the Imperium manifests in like different genes, different genetics, and that's why you have to like have these different specialized units? Yeah, I don't know. Again, let me know, lore experts, in the comments. I'm still sort of wrapping my head around the lore and the Imperium.
Officio Assassinorum, oh boy, these people are deadly. Yeah, they're called assassins, they should be, but oh man, these people will mess you up. So these are from the Officio Assassinorum, a very special organization, and they are handpicked by the Grand Master of the Officio Assassinorum from the, what was it called? Schola Progenium. It's basically an orphan school. Your parents got murdered by demons or something, you get sent.
It's Batman Factory. Got it.
Sent to this, and you get trained to be whatever. Tempestus Drop Troop, an Inquisitor, maybe even. Maybe you get a blank gene and you get thrown into the Sisters of Silence, or sometimes you just disappear. When you are taken, however, you go to one of 4 temples, because the Assassinorum works in the temple style of things. These temples are the Vindicare, Caluxus, Calidus, and Eversor temples. Let's start with the Vindicare. I'm far away. I've been sitting here for 3 weeks. Poof! The Vindicare Temple is the main sniper-based temple. Gigantic sniper rifles for all these assassins. Their whole point is to be able to be in a spot and sit there, eye and scope, for weeks, waiting for their perfect target, taking people out from literal miles away after extremely long time periods. The Vindicare...
That's funny. That's sort of an exaggeration of kind of the iconic sniper of the Vietnam War. The famous one being, of course, Carlos Hathcock, who could famously get tasked in, kind of by the CIA to go on these super top secret assassination missions behind enemy lines of like North Korean generals, and he would infiltrate and set up in his sniper position by carefully and slowly creeping through the jungle to set up to his vantage point, and then he would sit there and he would observe them and he would wait for his shot, right? Because he wanted to be in place before any of the routine sweeps, any of like the spun up, any of these security procedures were put in place. It just, he's got his book. He's kind of a legend. Every other sniper kind of, pays homage to the god of the sniper, Carlos Hathcock. And he famously had some instances where like the North Vietnamese were patrolling looking for a sniper in the area, and they were within like 10 feet of him, and he had to be like silent and camouflaged. And yeah, there's a lot of techniques that you can use to remain undetected, remain still in a position for a long period of time. You got to think about all the sort of ways that can go haywire. For example, human beings have all their biological functions, and so yeah, like you would have to like defecate in a bag, but remember, human being's nose can smell poop a long ways away, so like you've got to keep that smell concealed somehow. And again, if you're there for 3 days, you got to figure out how to do it, right? And you have to do it undetected. Like these are sort of the things you have to deal with. How do you eat but not have your food, the smell of food, right? Especially if it's like not native to the area. Thinking like the smell of, I don't know, pasta in the desert, right? Like something that's going to stand out. Those sort of olfactory tells can be really compromising. Anyway, there's a whole art to sitting still for a long, long period of time.
Vindicare Temple is about precise, perfect aim. There have been reports of Vindicares being able to single out particular body parts from over 2-3 miles away. Temples in the head, the jugular, for instance, and been sitting there after weeks. And when they're ready, take that shot, time is done, packs them up. The Custodes Temple, however, is a lot more about shape-shifting and deviant art. It's mostly a female-based one, or at least it seems to be, and this allows a lot of body augmentation for certain individuals to be able to kind of transmorph themselves and infiltrate areas that are problems.
I don't see how that's like a women-only thing, like disguises, or is this sort of supposed to be like a what do they call them? Like a honeypot, like female spies using their sexuality to gain intelligence, right? There's a lot of stories actually of Chinese spies using attractive female spies to basically sleep with connected politicians or leaders in secure industries and that sort of thing in order to gain intelligence. So it definitely has a long history, but again, if you're fighting Xenos, that isn't really the case, right? Like a Tau aren't gonna be seduced by another species female, right? The orcs don't. The orcs aren't gonna care. They're not gonna find it attractive. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Okay, guys, I think this has to be a logical stopping point. We are over 30 minutes, and again, I try to keep these videos sort of reasonable for you. Thank you so much for watching to the end. Let's get this. Thanks so much for watching to the end. If you liked this video, man, hit that like button. Comment down below on stuff that I missed, either in my history or in the lore. I know Bricky kind of smooths over some things to make it clear, but again, I'm trying to drink from the fire hose and learn as much as possible, as fast as possible on Warhammer. Other than that, that is all I had, and I will see you guys next time.